Welcome back to the deep dive. You know how we operate. We take a complex topic, grab a stack of research, and deliver the essential insights, the surprising facts, and, the path to genuine understanding.
And today, the topic is huge.
It is. We're deep diving into a word that everyone uses, but I think very few people truly understand the scope of it. Meditation.
That's a powerful way to put it. Because when most people hear meditation, they instantly think of the modern secular ideas.
Right. Sitting quietly, maybe a stress reduction app.
Exactly. Or, trying to empty the mind, whatever that means. But the source material we've gone through for this shows that the term is, historically and linguistically, a massive chameleon.
It's more than just confusing. It feels almost misleading at this point. Is it just focus? Is it just relaxation?
And that's our mission today.
Our mission is to move past that general kind of therapeutic understanding of meditation. We're going to trace its entire evolution, starting with its completely surprising Latin origin.
And then follow it all the way to its ultimate refinement in the Buddhist context as bhava.
Which is, that's a practice aimed at nothing less than complete liberation.
It's a whole different ballgame. So we're going to dissect the components that define the practice globally, chart the linguistic shifts across Asia, from Sanskrit dhyana all the way to Japanese Zen.
And most critically, analyze what this high-stakes practice really demands. It's not just a technique, is it?
Not at all. It's a cohesive, integrated system of ethical discipline, mental stability, and this deep, penetrating wisdom.
Okay, let's unpack this, and let's start right at the beginning, because the word's original meaning is, it's fundamentally contrary to what most of us assume today.
It really is. The English word meditation is a classic example of a concept that's been translated, appropriated, and repurposed over millennia.
And in the process, the original meaning gets, obscured?
Completely. It often completely obscures the original Latin intent. The term comes from the Latin noun meditatis and the verb meditate.
Philosopher, what would meditare have actually meant to me?
Well, it definitely would not have meant sitting quietly and observing your breath. That's the default modern image, but it's just not there in the Latin.
So what was it?
The definition was rich. It meant to think over, to ponder, to consider attentively, even to rehearse mentally, and crucially, to practice or to train.
To train, so it's an active process.
Very active. The core sense was that of a deliberate, measured mental exercise. It involves sustained, focused engagement with an idea or principle or a lesson.
Okay, so give me an example, like a Roman orator preparing for a big speech in the forum.
That's a perfect example.
He's going over his points. He's mentally rehearsing his delivery. Is that meditare?
That is precisely meditare. He was mentally practicing the skill of persuasion. Or, a Stoic philosopher reflecting on the nature of virtue.
Or mentally rehearsing how they'd respond to some misfortune, a core Stoic practice.
Yes, that was meditare. The intent was always intellectual training or moral shaping. The distinction here is just so important. The original concept was explicitly about active mental consideration.
So thinking, discursive thought.
Deep analytical reflection. Often involving discursive thought, yes. Not the intentional cultivation of mental silence or non-thought.
That is it's a fascinating realization. We think of meditation as stopping thought, but its linguistic ancestor was all about organizing and perfecting thought.
Exactly.
So how does that meaning carry forward? Does it stay consistent for a while?
It holds fast for a very long time, actually. Through the medieval period, for instance. When Christian monks adopted the term, the focus shifted a bit.
To scripture, I assume.
Right. To the contemplation of scripture or systematic reflection on sacred texts. It was a practice called lectio divina, but it was still largely discursive, analytical thinking.
So you're mentally wrestling with profound ideas.
You're filling the mind with specific, potent ideas, not emptying it.
And this keeps going, right, even into the scientific age. You had a great example in the outline, René Descartes.
Yes, Descartes is the perfect case. When he wrote his foundational philosophical text in the 17th century, Meditations on First Philosophy,
he wasn't trying to get enlightened or find inner stillness.
Not at all. He was engaging in serious, skeptical, reflective thinking. It was a deeply analytical, intellectual process aimed at establishing absolute certainty in knowledge. He was using the term in its proper original Western sense.
So that history is really clean and consistent. When does the break happen? When does meditation stop meaning thinking and start meaning what we think it means.
The massive shift happens much, much later, primarily in the 20th century.
Uh-huh.
And it seems to be driven by two main factors.
Okay.
First, there was this growing Western hunger for and exposure to Asian spiritual traditions, specifically Buddhism and various forms of yoga.
And second,
the simple need for a convenient linguistic label. You have all these highly specialized practices from Asia, and you need a word for them in English.
so the Western world just grabs the word meditation because it was the closest existing term for deep mental training, even though the application was now totally different.
It was a linguistic accident, really. The word meditation was just applied as a translation label for this huge variety of Asian practices, dhyana, Bhavana, Zen, and so on.
Practices that were fundamentally non-conceptual.
Exactly. Focused on experiential states of unification or insight.
And we noted this really picked up steam early on with groups like the Theosophical Society in the early 1800s, people like Anne Besant popularizing these ideas.
That's right. It was a linguistic shortcut that it became permanently embedded in the language.
So the vital takeaway here for you, the listener, is that the practices we now call meditation-like, focusing on the breath, are fundamentally different from the original Latin meditare.
Different in function, different in goal. The original was active mental consideration.
Mm-hmm.
The modern usage, for the most part, refers to non-thought or absorption. We have to hold that distinction as we go forward.
It explains so much about why the contemporary definitions can feel so shallow.
It really does.
That sets a perfect baseline. So before we track the words journey across Asia, let's just clarify. What are the elements that define meditation today, even in its most secular context?
Good idea.
If you strip away all the metaphysical baggage, what's left? What makes a practice meditation now?
Well, across cultures and even in psychology, certain elements consistently appear. The first, and maybe the simplest, is intentional attention.
You consciously choose something to focus on.
You choose an object to focus. And that choice is what defines the style, right? It could be the physical sensation of the breath, a mantra, a visual image.
Or even just awareness itself, the raw field of sensory experience.
Exactly. So that's one. The second essential component is sustained awareness.
So it's not enough to just choose the object.
No, you have to maintain your attention over time. And this process is inherently dynamic. It involves noticing when the mind inevitably drifts into distraction.
Which it always will.
And then gently, without force or frustration, bringing the attention back to the chosen object. That redirection is the core of the training.
So wait, if I sit down for 20 minutes, the actual meditation isn't the 20 minutes of perfect focus. It's all those little moments of noticing I'm distracted and then, coming back.
Precisely. The hundreds of tiny moments of returning, that is the training.
Okay, what's next?
The third component is the effect of this process, the regulation of mental activity. By continually redirecting your attention, you start to reduce that habitual excessive mental reactivity.
That constant churning of analysis, planning, judgment.
All of it. And that cultivates calmness, mental stability, or clarity.
And this is where it gets really interesting from a psychological standpoint. Meta-awareness. Can you elaborate on why observing thoughts as events is so foundational?
Meta-awareness is really the ability to shift your perspective. Normally, we are completely fused with our thoughts. We are in the mental movie, believing the narrative, reacting to the content.
You're the main character.
Right. Meta-awareness means stepping back and realizing that a thought is just a thought. It's a transient mental event that arose and will pass. You're watching the film of your mind, but you are no longer acting in it or identifying with the characters.
That perspective shift is so powerful because it breaks the link between a thought and a compulsive action or reaction.
It's the foundation of emotional intelligence in many ways. You gain space. And finally, because it's a systematic mental exercise, meditation is defined by repetition and training.
It's a skill.
It's a skill, just like learning a musical instrument. The effects aren't magical or immediate. They accumulate through consistent, regular practice.
So when we look at the results of this training, particularly from a secular scientific view, what do the sources highlight as the common effects?
The benefits are pretty substantial and well documented.
Yeah.
Things like an enhanced attention span, better concentration, a significant increase in emotional regulation.
Meaning fewer impulsive reactions.
Yes. Reduced stress and reactivity, enhanced self-awareness, and even the ability to alter deep-seated habitual patterns of thinking and feeling. It just makes the mind a more manageable, less reactive system.
Okay, now let's be just as precise about the crucial non-components. This is where all the popular misunderstandings muddy the waters. What is meditation not?
Right. First, it is fundamentally not ordinary thinking. If you're sitting quietly planning your grocery list or analyzing a conflict with a colleague or solving a problem,
Even if you're calm while doing it.
even if you're calm, you are engaged in discursive thought, which meditation aims either to stabilize through absorption or observe through insight. So taking a quiet moment to think things through is still just thinking.
Got it. What else?
It is also not passive relaxation. While deep relaxation is often a wonderful byproduct, meditation requires the active engagement of awareness. If you confuse it with lying down and just zoning out, you're trading clarity for dullness.
It requires energy and focus.
And that active quality means it's not imagination or daydreaming. No fantasizing, no visual storytelling, no mental wandering.
It's also not a trance or unconsciousness.
Crucially, no. The goal is never a loss of clarity or some kind of blankness. You have to maintain a lucid, sharp awareness. Dullness is a major obstacle to overcome.
Finally.
Finally, in its general modern application, it is not necessarily a belief-based practice. You can practice these techniques, attention regulation, sustained awareness, without needing to adopt any specific doctrine or metaphysical claim.
So to summarize it all, the general modern definition is something like learning how to pay attention on purpose in a specific way to develop clarity, stability, or insight.
That's a great summary. That's the baseline before we get into the really profound spiritual applications.
Okay, so having established that baseline, now we can track the evolution of the practice itself, the things the West use the word meditation to translate, and we start with the foundational Sanskrit term, dhyana.
Right. And what's interesting is that the Sanskrit root, kyai, also means to think or contemplate.
So again, even in Asia, the original concept has this echo of focused mental work.
It does, but the connotation shifts immediately. Dhyana's original sense was sustained mental attention and continuous absorption in a specific object.
Absorption, that's a key word.
It's everything. It wasn't casual reflection. It was a deep dive where the mind stays with one theme without scattering. It represents the unification of the mind through focus, a state that's beyond ordinary thought.
And this unified focus finds its experiential refinement in the Pali equivalent.
Yeah.
Jhana. This is where the practice really solidifies its structure.
Yes. Jhana is the Pali form, and the associated verb, jayati, carries this heavy semantic weight. To burn, to absorb, or to dwell.
To burn.
Yes, as in burning away impurities or distractions. The emphasis here is on deep mental unification. Thinking, in the discursive sense, becomes progressively quieted and eventually just ceases, leading to states of profound stability and bliss.
So the goal of jhana is absorption and stability. A depth of attention so unified that the machinery of conceptual thought temporarily fades out. It's like the highest form of concentration.
It is. You can think of it as the preparation chamber. You're forging the mind into a tool that's capable of seeing reality without any distortion.
Okay, now let's track this geographical and cultural transformation. Dhyana moves into China, becomes Chana, and then it's simplified to Chan. You mentioned this involved a kind of cultural simplification.
Right, and a push toward directness.
Tell me more about the cultural context there. Why would the detailed Pali analysis become less central in China?
Well, the cultural environment in China, particularly the influence of Taoism, really prized direct, immediate understanding and naturalness over complex analytical mapping.
I see.
The Pali tradition, with the jhana stages, is highly systematic and technical. I mean, it maps out every specific factor present in each stage of absorption. When Buddhism traveled, the Chinese intellectual tradition often filtered out that kind of scholasticism in favor of immediacy.
So they were basically saying, we don't need a map with 10,000 labels, we just need to get there.
Precisely. The emphasis in Chan moved away from the technical analysis of stages and toward this direct, effortless awareness of the present moment. The structure became less analytical and much more experiential. It was a rejection of intellectualizing the process.
And then that tradition moves into Japan and becomes Zen, which represents, as the sources suggest, a kind of radical minimalism.
Zen, which is just the Japanese pronunciation of Chan, pushes that simplification to its absolute limit. It involves an almost total and sometimes confrontational rejection of conceptual explanation of theoretical stages or of using techniques as goals.
The ultimate expression being Zazen, just sitting.
Yes. The key idea of Zen is just sitting, nothing to add, nothing to remove. It's the purest form of non-interference. It's a statement that the goal isn't something external you achieve through striving.
It's already here.
It's already inherent in the moment of simply being present. What started as active mental exercise in Latin eventually becomes, in its most radical form, a practice defined by the absence of striving. This historical journey just reveals why meditation is such a uselessly broad term today.
We've definitely established the linguistic ambiguity. So now we move to the specialized context that defines the practice for ultimate freedom. We're moving from general definitions to the specialized, high-stakes practice known as Bhavana,
Right.
specifically as it's taught in the Buddhist suttas, the primary texts, and promoted by traditions that stick closely to those foundational teachings, like those associated with Anumodana Sankalpa. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Bhavana is the definitive Pali term for meditation in the Buddhist teaching, and it means cultivation or development. It's so much stronger than just practice or focus.
Cultivation, like a farmer.
Exactly like a farmer tending a field. It implies deliberate, sustained, systematic tending to the mind.
That distinction cultivation versus simple stress relief is immense. This isn't just a mental hygiene habit. This is like restructuring the entire psychological landscape.
It is. And the sources are crystal clear on the radical goals of Bhavana. The primary goal is the abandonment of unwholesome processes
Greed, hatred, delusion.
and the systematic development of wholesome qualities like clarity, compassion, and stability. This cultivation establishes a direct experiential understanding of reality as it actually is, yathabhuta.
Seeing things as they are. And what does this cultivation ultimately achieve?
The culmination is irreversible. It leads progressively to profound dispassion, cessation, and ultimate liberation, or nibbana. This liberation is freedom from the entire cycle of suffering, which the sources define as encompassing the whole cycle of compulsive grasping and resistance.
I think we need to pause on this. The transformative versus therapeutic distinction. Most people approach meditation hoping it will fix a temporary problem, anxiety, high blood pressure.
Right.
But you were saying that Buddhist bhavana is fundamentally aimed at something else entirely.
It is. Therapy aims to make you a functional, happier, well-adjusted person within the confines of our existing conditioned reality. Bhavana in the Buddha's teaching is an integrated training.
Ethics, attention, wisdom.
Yeah, all of it, aimed at transcending that conditioned reality altogether. It's designed to end suffering permanently by cutting the root cause, not just by managing the symptoms. It's transformative because it fundamentally alters your relationship with reality. It's a complete path, not a singular technique.
Which is why true bhavana is not just about what happens when you close your eyes.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that it is a holistic system involving three inseparable pillars, or trainings, that have to support and reinforce each other: sila, samadhi, and panya.
And if one pillar is weak,
The whole structure of liberation fails.
so let's delve into the foundation first. A, ethical purification, or sila. This is often the part that gets minimized in secular discussions. Why are ethics inseparable from mental development?
Sila means morality or virtue. It includes restraint of bodily and verbal misconduct, ensuring careful, non-harming actions. It also means sense restraint, or indriyasavara.
What does that mean, practically?
It means being careful not to let sights, sounds, smells, tastes, or touch automatically pull the mind into states of craving or aversion. And it also means maintaining a simplicity of life that's conducive to internal seclusion.
Internal seclusion. I like that. That's a much more practical goal for a layperson than physically withdrawing. It means creating a grounded, internally coherent space, regardless of external chaos.
Absolutely. And the sources explain why ethics are non-negotiable. An unrestrained, unvirtuous life generates internal friction. It produces agitation, regret, remorse.
And this thing called papanika.
Massive mental proliferation, yes, papanyaka.
Can you give us a modern example of papanika generated by a lapse in sila?
Of course. Think about having a particularly sharp, critical interaction at work. Maybe you gossip about a colleague or send an angry, unskillful email.
We've all been there.
Right. Even if the interaction is over, that internal mental story spins for hours. Self-justification, rehearsing better comebacks, worrying about the repercussions. That continuous agitated churn is papanyaka.
And if your mind is filled with that residual guilt and anxiety,
It simply cannot settle into stillness.
so sila isn't about following arbitrary rules, it's psychological engineering. If you act ethically, you eliminate the fuel source for remorse and internal noise, which then makes meditation possible.
That is the essential message. The source we looked at even cites a text which maps this causal relationship perfectly. It says, "For one who is virtuous, there is no remorse. For one without remorse, gladness arises. From gladness, joy. From joy, tranquility."
Tranquility, basadi.
That calm we associate with deep meditation. It's the result of ethical purification, not just some random state you stumble upon. Ethics are part of meditation, not premeditation.
Okay, so once that groundwork is stable, we move to be mental unification, or samadhi, associated with samatha, or calmness. This is the training that stabilizes the mind.
Samadhi is about bringing the mind to a point of sustained, non-distracted attention, or sati. This calms all mental and bodily formations and leads to that progressive unification of mind, which manifests experientially as jhana.
Now, we noted that this unification is achieved through letting go, not through forceful concentration. That sounds so counterintuitive to the modern idea of focus.
We often confuse concentration with brute force, gritting our teeth to stay focused. Samadhi is the opposite. It involves gradually relaxing the mind's compulsive desire to chase thoughts or to push experiences away.
And as that resistance drops,
the mind naturally settles into its object, effortlessly.
Yeah.
This process fundamentally weakens the 5 hindrances.
Sensual desire, ill will, restlessness and worry, sloth and torpor, and skeptical doubt. They're like the mental malware that prevents stability.
Exactly. And when these are weakened, this profound inner stillness, passaddhi, arises. The mind becomes clear, bright, and most importantly, serviceable kamanyan.
Serviceable.
Like taking a powerful but scattered laser beam and focusing it into a single, highly potent point. Without that stillness and serviceability, the mind cannot hold the light steady enough for the final, most profound training.
Which brings us to see, insight, and discernment, or panya, often called vipassana. This is the completion. This is the wisdom that achieves liberation.
Panya is the direct, experiential seeing, not just philosophical understanding of reality through the lens of the 3 marks of existence. This is the moment when that stabilized mind truly sees the nature of conditioned existence.
Let's make the 3 marks as vivid as possible for you, the listener. First, impermanence. Anicca.
Anicca is realizing that everything, without exception, your body, mood, the mountain, the economy, every single thought, every feeling is continuously changing. It is fundamentally unstable.
Like the source example of the sunrise and sunset, where the person also ends the day subtly changed.
It's a moment-to-moment realization that nothing stays put.
Okay, second, unreliability.
Okay.
Why is impermanence unreliable?
Because we desperately want stability and happiness, but we seek it in the very things that are inherently unstable. The moment we grasp onto something pleasurable, a mood, a relationship, a success, it starts changing. And that change causes distress, disappointment, suffering. Dukkha is seeing the inherent stress of it all.
Even when things are good.
Yes. The stress and unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence, despite our best efforts to stabilize it.
And the third, the most radical mark, is non-ownership, anatta, the dissolution of the permanent self.
Anatta is seeing that these impermanent, unreliable processes, the body, the sensations, the thoughts, consciousness, are not owned, directed, or controlled by any fixed, permanent entity called I.
So when you see anger arise,
you realize that there is no solid I that decided to make the anger appear, nor is there an I that can command it to instantly disappear. The whole process is seen as dependent arising, by kasamuppada, just a flow of impersonal phenomena.
And this realization, the direct seeing of anatta, is what cuts that deep illusion of self-identification, sakkaya.
Yes, that illusion of a solid self is what drives all our clinging and fear. When panya cuts through it, the result is inevitable. Dispassion, or nibbida, arises a lack of compulsive investment in phenomena.
And this culminates in cessation, nirodha.
Which is liberation. The complete system of Bhavana uses ethics to create stillness, and stillness to create the serviceability needed to generate this penetrating wisdom.
This is a path laid out with extreme clarity. So if the outcome is so profound, leading to these irreversible changes, the central question for the listener becomes, what are those changes and who is allowed to achieve them?
Right.
We have to tackle the common perception that this liberation is reserved only for monastic monks or bhikkhus.
That is perhaps the most enduring misconception in the modern practice landscape. The transformative results of correctly practiced bhavana lead to 4 irreversible stages of attainment, regardless of the practitioner's external status.
And those stages are markers of irreversible freedom.
Exactly. The path begins with the first definitive irreversible stage, sotapanna, or stream entry. Then it moves through the sakadagami and adagami stages and culminates in the final liberation of the arahat stage.
And each stage marks the permanent eradication of specific mental defilements.
Correct.
So let's address the elephant in the room. The status of the practitioner. The sources, the suttas, state that these profound results are accessible to everyone, not just monastics.
Absolutely. The foundational suttas assert explicitly that attainment is based on the purity and completion of the three trainings, sila, samadhi, panyana, on external status or robes.
So you can attain all four stages, including arhatship, as a layperson, a householder.
You can. The distinction often drawn in later traditions about the impossibility of lay arhatship is a later interpretation. It's not a foundational teaching.
If that's true, if the path is open to all, then why has the emphasis for centuries been so heavily placed on the monastic life as the necessary route? What are the practical barriers cited for a householder?
That's a critical question, and it requires some nuance. While the potential for attainment exists universally, the practical requirements of the training,
The time commitment.
the time commitment needed to stabilize samadhi and generate sustained panya, it naturally favors the monastic lifestyle. A person dedicated full time to the path, free from domestic duties, income generation, and complex social obligations, just has an enormous advantage.
It's easier to maintain sila purity and get the seclusion needed for deep practice.
Exactly. Lay people achieve it, but they have to be extremely disciplined in integrating the practice into a chaotic modern life.
Which brings us to the principle of investigation. The Buddha urged investigation over mere belief.
Precisely. The practice, especially in a sutta-based context, rests on this principle. You have to know for yourself, see for yourself, rather than simply accepting the different interpretations or sectarian views that developed over time. The goal is to return to the original instruction set.
Now, many of our listeners have experience with established traditions. Thai forest, Burmese Vipassana, Sri Lankan lineages, Mahayana, and they've achieved significant calm and clarity through them.
Of course.
We have to acknowledge that these systems, particularly those popularized by teachers like U Ba Khin and S.N. Goenkaji, were revolutionary. They made advanced Vipassana accessible globally.
Their contribution is undeniable. They demonstrated that lay people could achieve profound mental states. However, the sources also point out a limitation that even these teachers recognized.
You're referencing Goenkaji's acknowledgement that the popular 10-day retreat format is just a skeleton?
Yes. These retreats provide the foundational skill, the framework for stability, and basic insight. But the notion, which is widespread, that a single technique like body scanning alone, practiced for a few days a year, is sufficient to reach the higher, irreversible stages of liberation.
That's stated as untrue.
It's stated clearly as untrue. It requires the complete system.
So, the Anumadana Sankalpa approach isn't necessarily a rejection of those traditions, but it's more of a guide for practitioners to move beyond the skeleton.
It acts as either a supplement or a complete development path. It's built on the foundations learned in traditional retreats, but it urges the practitioner to move into the complete Buddha Dhamma as outlined in the suttas.
And this move involves a critical integration, taking the practice off the sitting cushion.
Yes.
Explain that integration. If the mind is serviceable, how does the practice transition from formal sitting meditation to continuous life practice?
Well, the practice is not meant to be reserved for the cushion. It has to transition to open-eyed meditation and incorporation into all postures: walking, standing, lying down, and engaging in activity. The continuous aim is mindfulness of mental, speech, and bodily actions that do not harm oneself or others.
So in essence, you're incorporating both stability, samatha, and insight into every single moment.
This is the high standard of Bhavana. And furthermore, to achieve this constant stability, specific techniques are employed to remove agitation. This includes stabilizing the breath and actively cultivating the 4 Brahma Viharas:
The heartfulness states, loving kindness, compassion.
loving kindness, metta; compassion, karuna; sympathetic joy, mudita; and equanimity, upekkha.
Can you give us a practical example? How does cultivating, say, sympathetic joy, mudita, actively remove agitation in a modern competitive workplace?
It's a great question. In a competitive setting, seeing a colleague succeed often triggers jealousy or a feeling of personal threat. This is pure papanyaka mental agitation.
All right.
Mudita is the practice of consciously rejoicing in their success as if it were your own. By deliberately choosing to participate in their joy, you actively cut the root of envy, ill will, and comparison.
So you're stabilizing your mind and strengthening your sila at the same time.
At the exact same time. This cultivation establishes what the tradition calls the Brahma realm, a profound state of ethical and emotional clarity, while you are still in the human body.
That makes perfect sense. If you live from a place of unified ethical stability, the mind is always ready for insight. If the goal is permanent, irreversible liberation, the training has to be permanent and integrated into every aspect of life.
It must permeate everything. The sutta-based path is a rigorous ethical and mental training designed not for brief periods of calm, but for permanent freedom achieved by dissolving the illusion of self through wisdom.
This has been a monumental journey. We started by revealing the historical confusion around the term meditation, showing that its Latin root, meditare, meant active mental exercise, not stillness.
Right. Then we tracked that word as it became this blanket label for profound Asian practices.
From Dhyana's sustained attention all the way to Zen's radical minimalism.
But we established that the actual path to liberation is captured by Bhavana, the deliberate cultivation of the mind through the three inseparable trainings: the ethical purification of sila,
The mental stabilization of samadhi, and the penetrating wisdom of panya.
and that wisdom is anchored in the direct, moment to moment, seeing that everything is impermanent, anicca, inherently unreliable, dukkha, and characterized by non-ownership, anicca.
And most importantly for you, the learner, we affirmed that this entire transformative path, culminating in irreversible stages like arahatship, is fully accessible to the dedicated layperson who commits to the complete integrated Sutta-based cultivation, moving beyond foundational skeleton techniques.
The core distinction is that Bhavana is not about feeling better, but about getting better at seeing. It necessitates ethics and stability, but the mechanism for freedom is wisdom quietening the mind enough to reveal, moment to moment, how the entire experience of suffering is constructed through the compulsive belief in a permanent self.
So what does this all mean? The radical implication of this deep dive is the concept of non-ownership, the dissolving of the illusion of a permanent controller. We encourage you to consider this in your own life today when you feel that sting of betrayal, or you cling intensely to a pleasurable moment, or you worry about a future outcome. What everyday actions are still being driven by the deep habitual illusion of a solid permanent I that needs to protect or acquire. Something for you to ponder as you continue your learning journey.